I lived in my car for 3 months. From December of 2022 through March of 2023, I lived in my car in Southern California. And although I provided various different explanations at the time as to why I was doing that, I think I myself didn't even understand why I was really making such a drastic lifestyle change and why my values seemed to change so drastically in such a short period of time. And after doing months and months of self inventory and introspection, I think I finally figured it out. Now, before I explain why I lived in my car, I want to share this quick little story with you. When I was maybe 3 or 4 years old, my parents put me in daycare because they were both working. And one day in the daycare, for whatever reason, they decided that they were going to clean up while we were still there. And part of the cleaning process was vacuuming the floors. Now, unbeknownst to them and myself, I was petrified of loud noises. For whatever reason, vacuum cleaners, lawnmowers, anything that made a loud noise, especially when it was unexpected, was enough to send me into a full-blown meltdown. And like I said, they decided to clean while we were there, and that included vacuuming. So they started vacuuming, and if my memory serves me correctly, I started bawling. I started bawling my eyes out. And I told my parents all about it, and it wasn't really that big of a deal. I was just scared of the vacuum cleaner. But to me, I saw it as an eye-opening moment. I learned a lot about myself through that experience. And I remember when I was around 5 or 6 years old, my mom would take me to Walmart with her because obviously she's not going to leave me at home alone. So she would take me to Walmart with her when she'd go grocery shopping. And while she would shop for food, I would always go to the vacuum cleaner section and just stare at them. And for somebody who just saw me doing this, imagine walking into a Walmart looking for a vacuum cleaner and you just see this little 6-year-old staring at the vacuum cleaners. They probably thought I was a weirdo. And truth be told, I was, and I still am. But the reason why I did this was because I needed to confront that fear. I knew that I had this deeply rooted fear within myself of vacuum cleaners, and I needed to prove to myself that they were actually harmless, and not just harmless, but actually helpful. They were helpful whenever you want to clean. Nowadays, I use a vacuum cleaner every single week whenever I want to clean my room. But I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not faced my fear head on. This has proven to be a fundamental facet of my personality, of my line of reason, is that I need to face my fears head on in order to conquer them. This isn't always the most efficient way of going about that, because more often than not, when you have a fear, it's at least partially justified for one, but also somebody else has overcome your fear for you so that you can gain more insight on it. But for me, for whatever reason, conceptualizing it and observing it from the outside looking in simply doesn't work. Case in point, when I quit my job at H&M. If you don't know the story, let me go ahead and brief you on it really quickly. When I was 20 years old, I decided that I wanted to go full-time on YouTube. Now you see right now I have over 150,000 subscribers, which I'm very, very grateful for, by the way. But at the time, I had maybe 600 subscribers, and I was nowhere near getting monetized. It wasn't 600 subscribers with momentum. It was 600 subscribers that I had gotten one by one, going on Omegle, asking people when I did my public interviews, so on and so forth. And to risk the last semblance of stability that I had, which was my job, for a future which was largely uncertain, was absolutely petrifying. It scared me twice as much as those vacuum cleaners scared me when I was in that daycare. And I remember everybody thought I was tripping. Everybody. From my coworkers, to my parents, to some of my friends even, and even the girl that I was talking to at the time. The girl who ended up inspiring my first book, Soul Shock. Check that out if you haven't already. I was absolutely petrified of not only losing that financial stability, but also being a social outcast. And I think to an extent we all sort of fear this. But again, I'm the type of person that needs to face that fear head on. And I was actually rewarded by doing that, not just in the sense of me being able to build a career for myself, but also me being able to inspire other people, hopefully you included, to overcome their fears by facing them head on. Now, as I just mentioned, one of the main reasons why I was afraid to quit my job at H&M was the fear of losing that financial stability, or more aptly put, the fear of poverty. I was petrified of poverty. The notion of going broke was the scariest possible outcome for me, short of death. Because, of course, with being broke comes being a social outcast and just not being able to have the same level of freedom that I would have if I had more money. That was, and to an extent still is, my biggest fear. Now, that right there was the main reason why I decided to live in my car. I didn't know it at the time. I did not know it at the time. But in retrospect, I realize now that I needed to face the fear of poverty head on, because the worst case scenario for me was going homeless. And I think I even mentioned that in previous videos. I would say it in sort of an ironic way, but I was only ever half joking about being homeless. I remember I used to say that I would rather be homeless than work a 9 to 5. And when I went and lived in my car, that was me putting my money, or my lack thereof, where my mouth was. I decided to go ahead and live in my car to face my fear of poverty, to experience my worst possible outcome so that I could see for myself that it actually wasn't that bad. And truth be told, it wasn't. It really wasn't that bad at all. Now, with me making that lifestyle change so drastically, I realized that not only was I facing my fear of poverty, but I was also facing my fear of loss. You see, the only thing scarier to me than not having anything was getting everything and then losing it. That was the scariest possible idea for me, and I didn't really realize why this was until I started working on my third book, which I'll talk about here in a second. For anyone who doesn't know, I primarily grew up in the DFW area, the Dallas, Texas area, and this is pretty much my hometown. When people ask me where I'm from, I tell them I'm from DFW. But I wasn't actually born here. The first part of my life was spent in Louisiana, in the New Orleans area in particular. And the reason why this is so significant is because the whole reason why I moved from New Orleans to Dallas is because of Hurricane Katrina. I was one of the refugees, if you will, of Katrina. And it's hard to really articulate this to somebody who has never experienced something like this. It's actually almost unfathomable. And I think even though I downplayed the significance of it in my life in the past, I realize now that it really shaped my perception of the world. But Hurricane Katrina basically changed my whole life overnight. All of the security and comfort and stability that I had, as well as my family, but me in particular because I was only 5 years old, just vanished. Imagine one day you're living in the house that you're living in, and then a week later, you just don't live there anymore. There's no warning. You don't even sell the house or anything. You don't know of any of that. There's no transition. One day you're here, the next day you're somewhere else. That right there shaped my mindset in a way that has proven to be fruitful in some ways, in that, for one, I'm not afraid to travel and put myself out there because I understand that nothing is really stable or secure anyways. But at the same time, again, it also planted the seed of the fear of loss. And I think that's a big part of the reason why, I know that that's a big part of the reason why I felt the need, the sudden compulsion to sell pretty much all of my belongings and then move into a car. I realized that I needed to face the fear of loss head on. And I did just that. And when I look back on my car life journey, I don't regret anything. I have absolutely no regrets about having lived in a car, having gone to LA, having experienced all of that, and more importantly, having documented that process, not just through YouTube, but through my book, which is coming out January 11th, 2024.